So why is asset protection important? Well, you're starting a business, and if you operate as a sole proprietor, it's very easy to get started. You don't have to file anything with the state. You're individually responsible.
I actually just spoke with a hairstylist recently who is $170,000 in debt because she was sued by a competitor who found out that she had, unbeknownst to her, broken a non-compete. And they won. She actually got pinned with it. There are things that can happen in our businesses that we don't even know we're at fault for, and all of a sudden you get a letter.
As of January 1st of 2024, the federal government is requiring that every business entity file information, personal information about the owners and the managers. It's going into this giant database.
You only have 30 days to report this information to FinCEN. So the clock really starts ticking if you set up a business after January 1st. If you willfully avoid this law, you could potentially face 2 years in jail.
Welcome to The Millionaire Hairstylist, where our mission is to improve the financial well-being of creative professionals. If you're a salon owner, business owner, or even just a stylist or creative professional making more than $75,000 a year, then our guest today is not only someone you really need to listen to, but potentially hire, or at least someone like them. Garrett and Ted Sutton are asset protection attorneys, and they'll explain not only how legal entities like LLCs protect you in the case of lawsuits, which are far more common than you think, but more urgently, they'll explain about a new federal law that goes into effect January 1st that affects every business in the United States, and that if violated by businesses like the one you might own, could carry up to a $10,000 fine. Garrett and Ted have a long reputation of working with Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad, Poor Dad community. They're incredibly knowledgeable authors and guides in this world of the legal pitfalls of running a business. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Before we go, if you are a business owner, a hairstylist, a creative professional who's interested in improving your relationship with money, be sure to head over to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com. That's millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, where you can sign up for free financial lessons where we cover things like how to bring attorneys into your business and what they can do to protect your assets. Let's get right into it. Here's Garrett and Ted Sutton. These are two people and a business partner of yours that I've wanted to talk to and have been excited to talk to since we started The Millionaire Hairstylist, because you've been telling me for years about how important your asset protection team is, and we have them here with us, which is so crazy exciting. Do you want to tell us about Garrett and the Suttons here and why we're so excited to have them?
Absolutely. Yeah. So actually, I started my entity learning journey when I started reading some of the Rich Dad advisor books. And so I heard about Garrett back in 12, 13, when I started kind of checking out some of these books and learning about building wealth. And so I had the tenacity or gumption to reach out when I had no wealth or anything and start pursuing the journey of kind of discovering what setting up entities for my business would look like and doing that correctly. Because I'd done that before, but I always kind of went through like the LegalZoom route and kind of did it myself. And I thought, you know what, I just want to wind up doing this the right way so that I don't have to undo it later. And because that can be really expensive. And so I started talking with Garrett. I booked like an appointment. He has a company called Corporate Direct, and I engaged with his company in helping me form some of those entities for my businesses. And since then, I've called Garrett several times seeking advice when I'm making financial decisions or needing some entity help or asset protection, organizational structuring. And so I am super excited to be chatting with both Garrett and his son, Ted, today, who are both asset protection attorneys, authors, and just incredible people. And so welcome to the show, guys.
Oh, great. Thanks, Cash, for that introduction. It's good to see you again.
Yep.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about today's discussion because you guys have some really, really cool stuff to share. But before we get to something that's a little scary, actually, can you guys just briefly tell us your story of why you guys are doing what you're doing?
Well, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and spent all my winters skiing at Lake Tahoe and summers at Lake Tahoe, and decided, I want to live up near Lake Tahoe. So I moved to Reno, and I'm a lawyer, and I had to take the Nevada bar exam after the California bar 12 years later. That was a fun summer. And so, I've been practicing here in Reno for quite a while, and Nevada is one of the best states for asset protection, along with Wyoming, where Ted went to law school. And so I moved up to Reno. It's been a great city. The city has grown really well in the last 20 years. And I became very fortunate to become associate with Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Advisor team. And I've been able to travel around the world talking about financial education with Robert and the team. And it's just been really rewarding to be able to work with Robert and his team, teaching people about financial education and helping people with asset protection. So then I'll let Ted tell his story, but it's the same. He's a lawyer.
Yep. Yeah, so my story is pretty much a continuation of his. You know, as you know, I was born and raised in Reno. I mean, he's been here for 30 years. And he actually met my mom's brother studying for the Nevada bar when he moved up here. So that's how my parents met. And then, you know, I came into the picture a few years later and got two younger sisters, and we were all born and raised in Reno. I left for college to attend the University of Utah, which isn't too far, a good place to be. I got my degree in mining engineering, though. And
no way.
Yeah, so it's, you know, I kind of...
So you tried to escape.
I did,
and it just didn't work.
I did, but I eventually came back. I had traveled with him before, with Robert, with the Rich Dad team. I got to see the positive impact that he and other people are having on people's lives. You know, and a lot of the stuff that Robert's taught us has really changed the way that I think about the world and money and all that. So I took a year off, got some legal experience. Then I went to law school for 3 years in Wyoming, which is the best asset protection state in the country. Took the Wyoming bar, took the Nevada bar. Luckily, I passed both, you know, having that weight off my back. And so now I'm working with him. So far, it's actually been pretty good.
Garrett, can I ask, when people ask you what you do, how do you explain your vocation and the value of what an asset protection attorney does?
Okay, so I tell people that I'm an asset protection attorney. Our niche is that we form and maintain LLCs and corporations. You need to maintain them or else you'll lose the asset protection. And so I wrote this book, Veil Not Fail, because people will pierce the corporate veil and go after your personal assets if you don't follow the rules on a continuing basis. Piercing the corporate veil means they can go through the corporation and reach your personal assets, and it succeeds in 50% of all cases. So wow. A lot of people are not following these easy corporate rules to stay protected. So that's one of the things we talk about, Jordan, is how to not only set up the entity, but maintain it so you have this continuing protection.
Can we just talk again, just to set for the audience who may not know, because I don't want this to be entirely educational, but I do want to make sure we're sort of level setting some of the terms and concepts here. What is a corporate veil? What is asset protection? How does that functionally work to protect someone? Why are people creating LLCs? Like even just the function of this concept of what you do for someone who, you know, maybe they're just an employee right now, maybe they're just a Schedule C, you know, they're not at that stage yet and they don't have a clear understanding of why they would need an LLC or want to create a corporate entity. How does that work?
Well, and that is a great question, because you'll have a lot of people who are, you know, hairstylists or tattoo artists that operate as a sole proprietor, meaning they are operating in their individual name. You don't have to do a filing with the state. You don't have to, you know, follow these corporate formalities. But the problem is you don't have any asset protection. So if you get sued in the business, someone can reach all of your personal assets because you're doing business as yourself. Now, let's say you take that extra step and you form an LLC. You apply to the state, and we do this for everybody, but you apply to the state, you get a state charter saying you are a limited liability entity. You have the asset protection if you do it right, so that if you get sued in the business, not necessarily on a malpractice case, you can't really hide behind a corporation or an LLC if you engage in malpractice. But let's say you have a location and someone comes in and falls on the property, or you have a dispute with a vendor, right? And they're suing you. So why is asset protection important? Well, you're starting a business, and if you operate as a sole proprietor, it's very easy to get started. You don't have to file anything with the state, but you're doing business in your individual name, which means you're individually responsible if there's a problem. Now, when you're starting up, some people will say, well, geez, you're starting up, you can't afford the $1,000 or less for an LLC or a corporation. But I would argue that's when you need the most protection, is because you're getting started. You may not know what the ups and downs and risks are of business. So I think you need that protection right from the start. So as a sole proprietor, everything is at risk. If you get sued by a client or a vendor, they can get all of your other personal assets. They can get straight into your bank account. All right. If you operate as an LLC or a corporation, that's who they did business with. That's who they have to sue. And they don't have a shot at getting at your personal assets. So at the start, I think it's really important to have that LLC or corporation set up.
That makes a lot of sense.
I completely agree, because when I first started engaging Garrett to help me build out an entity structure that helped me protect my assets and my investments, I had no clue about this stuff. I had just kind of started making LLCs online, like Zoom, LegalZoom or whatever, right? And had no clue that I was doing things incorrectly. I selected manager managed instead of member managed, right? I did all these things that I had no idea about. And when I started reading some of Garrett's books, I started understanding the importance of doing this right. And in fact, I have probably paid tens of thousands of dollars to undo some of my poor entity structure that I created on my own off of just reading articles online back in, early 2010s. So, some of the audience might be wondering, like, well, it's great, asset protection and all of that, but I don't have anything. Well, I mean, if you own a house or if you have a bank account, right, you have something to protect. So my question in the beginning of all this entity stuff was, why would the government give a business the right to do something, mess up, and not hold the owners personally liable? Well, what I learned was that the government, in order to stimulate economic growth, had to provide some sort of vehicle that would protect people so that they would invest in the market. So if you've got somebody who's looking to invest in any business or start a business or build up any entrepreneurial venture, there's risk involved in that. And nobody wants to do that and risk their house, right? Risk their car, risk their personal bank account, risk their children's, college fund. So, Garrett, why is the government, providing these protections, and what kind of protection are they providing through LLCs?
Well, Cash, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the LLCs and corporations encourage economic activity. All right. People aren't going to take risks if they have to be held personally liable. And so the government understands this. Every state provides for the formation of corporations and LLCs. All right. And so the government knows that people will not do business when their personal assets are at risk. And so it's pure and simple economic development is the reason we have these entities. The other thing is, we're a very litigious society. The system allows attorneys to sue people and keep a percentage. It's called a contingency fee.
It incentivizes that legal behavior. Lawyers make money off of that.
The system incentivizes people to sue. And so the system, to balance, needs to incentivize protection of individuals. And so that's another reason why we have these protective LLCs and corporations.
Can we talk about the state aspect of that just really fast? Because Ted, you mentioned passing the bar in Wyoming and Nevada. Congratulations. You're 2 down. You only have 48 more to go. And you mentioned but I'm just curious, can you just elaborate? Because I think people, business owners, as they're learning, will hear someone say, oh, I got a Wyoming LLC or I got a Maryland LLC. What is it about the individual states that might cause someone to choose a particular state, maybe even the one they're not doing business in, to create a legal entity?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, Jordan. First off, I'm licensed in 2 states. I plan on being licensed in Texas, but after that, I'm going to stop at 3. So
okay,
yeah,
good. So
I only got one more to go right now, and then after that, I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm done. Anyway, so yeah, it's unique because in the U.S., corporate laws, a lot of it is state-based. Now, there's a new law that we're going to talk about later, which is at the federal level, but the system set it up to where states could compete with each other regarding like which state is the best to set up a corporation or an LLC or anything like that. And when it comes to corporations, Delaware's number one. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies set up their shop there, you know, like the Walmarts, the Amazons, the Googles, all that. And they also have the Court of Chancery, which is this corporate law court that specializes in corporate law. So if there's any shareholder disputes or anything, you can just do it there. And when it comes to LLCs, a lot of it depends on the specific circumstance. So we recommend Wyoming for holding companies. So let's say that you were to own real estate, right? You had a property in Texas. So in that case, we'd set up a Texas LLC. But instead of you owning the Texas LLC, we would set up a Wyoming holding company that you would own. And the benefit there is that if you're sued personally, it's much harder for that person to reach the assets that you own in the Wyoming LLC as opposed to like Texas or any other states. So a lot of it depends on the specific circumstances of your business. Like if you have a hair salon and let's say that you live in New York, like you're probably going to want to set up a New York LLC there. And that's because you're doing business there and you're probably going to be taxed as an S Corp and you're going to be paying payroll taxes for that. So yeah, it's nice that each state kind of has their own thing. And it's cool because it encourages competition amongst the states. But yeah, when it comes to corporations, LLCs, a lot of it just depends on your specific circumstance.
Hence the need to speak to a professional as opposed to just trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, if you're enjoying this podcast and you want to further your financial education, you can do so for free. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com, where you have an entire library of free financial lessons aimed at the well-being of creative professionals, including a lesson on why budgeting is a terrible, soul-sucking way to manage your money and why allocation is a much wiser system for managing your resources. Go to millionairehairstylistpodcast.com and sign up today.
So what's something with the use of LLCs, corporations forming these entities, the wealthy are using these like crazy, right? That they never own anything personally, right? It's like rich people don't own things, they control things, right? I've heard that that statement. And so if the wealthy are using these LLCs, well, what use do they have for someone who's not a billionaire or not a millionaire, right? What are the applications to a small business owner in asset protection? Maybe they grow. I'm not sure. Any thoughts?
Well, if the billionaires are using it, why shouldn't you? The billionaires want protection and you're a small business owner, you're entitled to the same protection. The law applies to everybody. But, the small business owner faces a number of challenges, including customers. I wrote a whole book called Toxic Client.
Really?
A lot of people coming in the door are potential litigants. And so we just need that protection day in and day out. Because, society is starting to fray and we just need protection from just all the angry people out there that are quite ready to sue. And so I would argue that, a billionaire needs to protect their assets, but a small business owner even more so needs to protect their assets and their future. And that's another issue, Cash, is when you're getting started, even if you have no money, if you get sued personally, someone can renew that judgment against you every 7 years. It's not the fact that you have no money, it's the fact that you have a future where you will have money.
Wow, so that can really follow you for a period of time.
It can follow you individually for a long time. So I think setting up properly at the start makes a lot of sense.
Well, I actually just spoke with a hairstylist recently, this last week, who is $170,000 in debt because she was sued by a competitor who found out that she had, unbeknownst to her, broken a non-compete. And she was sued, and they won, even though she had no clue about this whole thing, she didn't even know that this new person working in her business had signed a non-compete, and she actually got pinned with it. And I'm not an attorney. There are things that can happen in our businesses that we don't even know we're at fault for, and all of a sudden you get a letter. And let me tell you, I get many of these letters a year. So the use of these entities goes well beyond what you might think, like, oh, maybe someone will trip and fall, some of the things that you think aren't going to happen in your business or whatever. They do happen. And I can tell you personally, I get several letters every year of people saying, oh, I'm going to sue you for this, or I'm going to sue you for that. And it's part of being a business owner, on owning multiple businesses. But this woman is in debt because she lost a case. She had hired someone who had signed a non-compete. She breached the non-compete and actually lost in a case where she was sued in her state. And so there's things that can happen to you. And I talk to hairstylists and small business owners all the time. And I can tell you these things happen more often than you'd imagine. And so many people think, it's never going to happen to me. Just be nice to people. That's not how the world works.
Not anymore. Not anymore. Yeah. And so, those out of the blue scenarios, those horror stories, we have plenty of them. And it just is another sign for why you want to get asset protection in place right at the start. Because once you've been sued, it's too late to set up an LLC or corporation, right? Yeah. You need to have this set up when the seas are calm. When someone has sent you a notice that they're going to sue you, it's too late to set up an LLC or corporation. You can't put the seatbelt on after the car wreck. But Cash, there's another big issue we want to talk about, and that is the Corporate Transparency Act, which is a new law that no one is talking about.
Let's dive in. Let's
dive into this.
Just a little bit of context. We were emailing back and forth to put this conversation together. We're like, what should we talk about? And just big all caps, we have to talk about this act. So what's going on, guys? What should business owners be aware of?
Well, as of January 1st of 2024, the federal government is requiring that every business entity file personal information about the owners and the managers of that entity. And it's going into this giant database at the U.S. Treasury Department. The idea is that they're going to fight money laundering and terrorist financing by having all this information. I would argue that maybe the bad guys aren't going to tell the truth on their entity information. Yeah, I just wonder about that. But at the same time, 32 million American businesses are going to have to provide this information to the federal government. If you don't provide it, there are penalties of $10,000 and or 2 years in prison. And so people need to know about this new requirement. People aren't talking about it. It's coming. And so we just wanted to make your listeners aware of this new requirement. A lot of people aren't going to file this information here at Corporate Direct. We have an obligation to our clients to make sure that they're following the law. So we're going to be providing services whereby we file this information in a timely manner.
How is this any different than what it used to be, right? Because Wyoming, certain states used to be non-disclosure states, right? I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but there was some anonymity you could get by having a holding company in Wyoming. What did it used to be like, and how is this affecting us?
Yeah, so the Wyoming law stays intact. There's two separate bodies of law. There's federal law and state law. So Wyoming deals with state law. And we still recommend setting up LLCs there because your name still is not listed on the Wyoming Secretary of State's website. So you still have that anonymity there. The big difference with the Corporate Transparency Act is that it's the first law that requires you to report information to the federal government. So you already have to report information to the Secretary of State to set up your LLC or corporation or any entity. The difference here is that with the Corporate Transparency Act, you need to report it to the Financial Crimes and Enforcement Network, which is short for FinCEN, and it's a branch of the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So it just adds an additional burden for business owners to report this information to them. So instead of reporting only to one government body, you have to report it to two.
Are there any implications as far as taxes, as far as liability protection? Does it affect any of those things, or is it just an additional amount of paperwork that just needs to be
It's just an additional amount of paperwork. When you file, you don't have to pay a fee or anything. It's just an informational statement. But, they want your full name, your residence address. They want a copy of your driver's license or passport. I mean, this is some pretty sensitive information that's going into this giant government database. And the government confidently reports that no one will hack this database. But I mean, how many other government databases have been hacked? And you know what? No one ever gets caught. No one's ever held accountable for these hacks. And what's to say that this is going to be any different from any other government database? We'll see. But, our job is to make sure our clients are following the law. And we don't want someone to pay a $10,000 fine or go to prison for not following these rules.
Definitely. So when are we required to submit this information?
Yeah, so a lot of it depends on when your business was set up. So the act takes effect in January 1st of 2024. So 2 to 3 months from now. If you have an entity that was formed before January 1st, 2024, so all the entities that we have right now, you have an entire year to report this information to FinCEN. But if you set up an entity after January 1st, 2024, you only have 30 days to report this information to FinCEN. So the clock really starts ticking if you set up a business after January 1st. And if you miss the deadlines for that, it's $500 each day after you miss the deadline, up to $10,000. And then if you willfully avoid this law, you could potentially face 2 years in jail. And they're going to make examples out of people, but
for sure, they're going to make examples out of someone who willfully fails to file to file these forms. Right. The other thing to know, guys, is if you change your street address, if you get a new driver's license, if you have a new owner of the business, this all has to be updated as well. So you have an ongoing filing requirement if there are any changes within your business.
I think one of the things that I want to touch on is we could talk about all this stuff for a really long time, but I want to be as practical as possible, because I do think there's a lot of people in our audience who are at a stage in their careers, in their business, in their entrepreneurial endeavors, where this is things that they're really learning and thinking about. And I think we live in an era where everything can be done through an easy website, where it's 9 p.m. on a Sunday and you go create an LLC, and we know all the services that you could use to do this. And I've used them. Cash, you mentioned you've used them, but I think that there's a general feeling like, look, I'm a baby business. I'm an S corp. I don't need so much, overhead to put together an entity. And so obviously you guys are in the business of really walking people through this. So it's to your benefit that people would come to you as attorneys. But with that caveat aside, what are some of the mistakes people might be making when they do the DIY method? And what are the potential financial ramifications of those mistakes? Just so people are aware, like, hey, you have those options, but this is what you're gambling on if you decide to go your route. And here's some of the mistakes that you might make doing that.
So one would be on the Corporate Transparency Act. A lot of these companies that are setting people up online are not letting them know that you have to file this information. And so what you don't know, you don't know. No one's talking about this act. It's not like it's out there in the public.
I haven't heard of it prior to this conversation.
I've had to educate 2 congressmen on it. They don't know about it. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think Congress is going to hear an earful after January 1st when people have to start filing this information. But I believe it's here to stay. So if you're setting up online and you're using a service that doesn't let you know about the requirement for the CTA, the law says you're responsible for knowing this. All right. So it's your obligation to know the law, even though the DIY site doesn't tell you. The other problem with the DIY sites is a lot of times you need to have the minutes of the first meeting. You need to have the stock issued. A lot of these sites don't do that. And if the IRS ever comes calling on an audit and you don't have your share certificates prepared, that is a big mistake. And a lot of people don't know that. So, if you set up an entity and it's not perfect, Don't tell anyone, but you can clean it up. We help people clean up their entities and bring them current all the time.
I can tell you from personal experience, I tried doing all of my corporate formalities myself, until you start getting 10, 12 plus LLCs, it starts getting out of hand. And you start forgetting things and you get notices, and then you get a letter that says your LLC has been forfeited. And if your LLC ever reaches that status, Garrett, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, you're sued, you got nothing, right?
You are personally responsible at that point. If your entity is chartered, your corporate veil of protection goes away.
So, and I can just speaking from experience, set a lot of stuff up myself before meeting Garrett and kind of using corporate direct services. So here's what I found though. I found that it was entirely overwhelming to try to run my business, try to get more clients, master the art of marketing, service, finding locations, getting customers, making products, doing all those things, and managing corporate formalities. And I personally don't recommend any business owner trying to manage their own corporate formalities. I personally highly recommend you don't start doing things like doing your own books and filing your own taxes and all that kind of stuff. It's a disaster and it's a headache you don't need as a business owner. And I've already tried those things myself. So I have other people. I don't touch corporate formalities. That's all done through. I have several LLCs through Corporate Direct. They're handling mine, and it's a great experience. It's a fantastic experience to be able to know that, hey, whatever's going on, the right things are being filed. I'm getting the right notices. That's the mail's not going to the wrong PO box, or the PO box isn't full, and I'm not getting it.
It's the worst feeling
didn't
when
get
you
the
miss
notice.
Something. Yeah. And then you find it and the deadline is passed.
Yes.
So again, speaking practically here, guys, because hopefully someone is listening to this in our audience and is thinking, okay, yeah, I did the online service last year, but I really do want to find someone that can just make sure I'm doing things correctly, or I'm about to buy my building, or I'm growing as a business and I want to take this seriously, which is what we've been counseling for a long time at the Millionaire Hairstylist. So finding an asset protection attorney. So if someone's not going to call Corporate Direct, certainly there's lots of options out there. You guys are a provider that cash is used, but if they're, let's say, just looking locally, they want to work with someone in their area. What are the questions that a business owner should be asking an asset protection attorney if they're just trying to get a sense for, like, is this someone I really want to be working with? How would you, if you had to hire yourself or someone like you, what would you be looking for to really vet an attorney that you'd want to work with?
Well, I want to work with someone who knows business and real estate. I mean, if you're going to invest in real estate, I want the attorney that I'm working with to also be a real estate investor. Right? You want the attorney that's going to help you in business to be kind of an entrepreneur, and attorneys can be entrepreneurs. So I think you want someone with the mindset of a business owner or real estate investor. And certainly there are great attorneys out there, and in each locale, there are plenty of attorneys that can help you with this. A lot of people want someone local that can provide everything. At Corporate Direct, we help people in all 50 states, and we work with their local attorneys who maybe, do the employment contracts and the leases and everything else. And we just provide the asset protection and provide the notices that you need to just keep your entity strong. But yeah, we'll work with attorneys all over the country as a team to make sure that our clients' best interests are protected.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And you guys, in addition to doing all this, you guys are authors. And that's how I came into discovering you guys. Garrett, you've written a ton of books in which hearing your voice, whenever I hear your voice, it's like, wow, I'm listening to the audiobooks. It's strange. And Ted, you've recently written a book. Tell us about your guys' books, the books you guys are writing and what you guys are working on right now.
Yeah, so I have a lot of catching up to do with this guy. He's written 12, and I'm about to publish one.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And the whole gist of the book that I'm writing, it's titled The 5 Tricks to Teach Your Kids About Money. And the reason I wrote it is because they already don't teach financial education to adults. I mean, that's why Rich Dad, Poor Dad sold so well, is because a lot of people just weren't taught this information in school or anywhere else, really. So I decided to write a book that helps parents teach their kids about financial education. And I mean, they're not tricks in the sense that you're deceiving someone or playing a trick on them. They're just certain methods that you can use to boost your kids' financial IQ. And so I came up with 5 ways of things that parents can do to help their kids. My parents did some of them with me, and I know other people who've done similar stuff with their kids.
Can you tease one or two of the tricks?
Yeah. So one of them's like teaching them about stocks, teaching them the importance of investing there. And then the other one is setting up a lemonade stand just to give them some business experience.
I love that.
Yep. So those are the only 2. The other 3, go buy the book. And
and the book is free. So
there you go.
Away. We're starting a streaming platform called Sunstream, SUNN, Stream. And one of our focus areas is kids' financial education. So we've got shows for kids, gold and silver for kids, the history of money for kids, how to be an entrepreneur. And these are all on the Sunstream platform. And so it's a place where parents can have their kids watch video to learn about financial education. I mean, they just don't teach this in school. And, it's really the parents' obligation now to teach their kids about money. So we're providing the parents with easy doses and fun educational doses so their kids can learn about money at the right age.
That's amazing. I've got 4 kids myself, and teaching them manually over the years. And it's difficult because you're teaching something that typically they don't show any natural interest in. But I can tell you guys from personal experience, teaching them lessons about money when they're young, they hit that certain age where they're like 13, 14, at least my kids. I mean, they were like 12 and they're like, I want to start earning money. I want to start making money right away. And so it changes as they grow. And I can tell you from personal experience, I wish I had things like this. Cause you go to a restaurant or whatever, you see parents, they put the kid on the iPad, right? Just be quiet. What if there was something good on the iPad? What if there was something teaching them about money or financial education? It's a critical tool.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the most powerful tools for creating change in your own life and in the world and getting anything done, motivating people, getting them to show up to work, right? I mean, half the reason you get out of bed in the morning is money. Certainly that's why you go to work, right? So there's an amazing alternative in what you guys are doing. And I love that you're putting it into Sunstream, which is these video lessons, little lessons, bite-sized lessons for young kids, and that you're writing a book about this stuff. So I encourage everybody to go check that out. It's super important.
I have a potentially divisive question, guys.
Go ahead.
Allowance, pay for chores, none of the above.
Pay for chores. I got an allowance as a kid based on doing the chores.
Yeah.
I would have to agree with that.
Cash. I'm strongly opinionated on this, and my wife was different in the beginning. So when we first met, she had the like give them money so that they learn how to manage it and lose it and whatever. I've got a billionaire friend who says, you know what, your adult kids are still kids, but when they're teenagers, give them 20 grand, 30 grand and have them start a business and mess up. And I'm like, that's not for me.
Yeah.
He's like, you're going to have them learn early. And I get the argument, but I'm like, I'd rather have them earn the 30 grand and mess up because you can learn the same lessons. And so I am 100%, I want to introduce my kids to how the real world works and the real world consequences. That's my personal philosophy. And so anytime I can allow them to experience those consequences when they're young and when the consequences are small, I don't want them going to the bar and punching somebody out in the face and knocking them out and going to jail. You're not going to go to jail when you're 6 years old and you have to learn those lessons, right? So I want them to learn those consequences and reap the painful consequences when they're young as possible. And I think that's my personal philosophy. So if you're going to go find out how the real world works, try to go make money and not do anything. It's not how I've seen the world work anyway. So even if you're using other people's money, even if you're fundraising, I tell my kids, I'm like, hey, if you want money, come and ask me, but you're going to have to make a proposal worth investing in. And I'll invest, but it's got to be good, and then you'll have to do the work to make the return. And I'm going to take a heavy piece.
Good for you, Dad. I really like that. So some of the shows we have, our section is called Cool Kids Money Smarts, right? The cool kids know about money. And so one of our sections is gold and silver for kids. And so we got Mike Maloney, who wrote the book on gold and silver, and he's got 5 lessons that kids should know about gold and silver. We have Andy Tanner, who's one of the Rich Dad advisors, and he's been great teaching his, yeah.
I love it.
About teaching his family about money. So we have 4 lessons from he and his family about how they learned about money. And so we just have some great content. We're going to be developing more as we get going. But I just think this is an area where parents, like you say, instead of having them watch an iPad and TikTok and mindless stuff, to let them watch videos that are going to help educate them at an early age about money. And it takes a while for that to sink in. So why not start early?
So
absolutely.
We have five minutes left, guys. I want to be mindful of your time. And I want you to imagine that you get 5 minutes to sit down with a business owner. For whatever reason, they're not retaining full services, so they're not going to get the benefit of your ongoing counsel. And you have 5 minutes to tell them, here are some of the most important things you should never do that highly risk piercing your own corporate veil. They're an LLC owner, they're a salon owner. 5 minutes. What are some of the basic rules of the road to make sure they don't undermine their own corporate entity and expose themselves?
Don't harass the staff. So really, I mean, when you have employees, you have got to be careful. And, you want to provide respect to your employees and hopefully you get respect back. But if you have employees, you've got to be very careful these days. Having an entity won't protect you in that case. If you're engaged in some sort of sexual harassment or any type of harassment of an employee, that is a personal claim. The corporation, the LLC, does not protect you from that type of claim. And so I just encourage people to, act on the up and up when they have employees. That said, outside of that type of case, there's all sorts of business risks out there. And you really do need to have that LLC or corporation set up. And you need to have it set up right at the start. Because if you get sued as a sole proprietor or a general partnership, it's too late. You are personally responsible when that happens. You can't set up the corporation or LLC later and hope to be protected. So, Ted, what would you add to that?
Yeah, well, I think on top of that, it's important to just follow the corporate formalities. The corporate veil is kind of a metaphorical, it's a metaphor that helps describe the separation between you as an individual and your business. And to strengthen that veil protection, you need to follow a list of formalities. And there's several things you can do. Some of these include properly setting up your LLC with the Secretary of State, getting a separate EIN number and using that to set up a separate bank account, having an operating agreement that spells out what happens in the event someone wants to leave or if things go bad between members. And then also you need to make sure that you're holding yourself out as a manager of the business as opposed to just using yourself as an individual. So if you follow those formalities, it really does strengthen that corporate veil or the separation between your business and you as an individual. And the more of them you follow, the better off you'll be.
Amazing.
Guys, we could have easily gone another hour, and I would love to have you back in the
so
future
much more.
because because I feel like this is something that there's something about the creation of the LLC or the S Corp that really, I think for every business owner, and I found myself, I've only created my loan out corporation within the last couple of years, going from a Schedule C to loan out, where you feel like you're graduating into the fast lane of business. And it's like, everything's going a little faster and there's just a higher risk and things can go wrong in a way that they didn't used to when you were just a W-2 or a 1099 or a Schedule C. And so having confidence around making choices and knowing what the pitfalls are is such an important part of maturing and feeling confident in doing business. Cash, anything else you would add?
Yeah, I have one more question that I had on my list, but I didn't get to ask. So if we have 2 minutes, what are your thoughts on series LLCs?
We don't form them. I don't like them. They haven't been tested in court. The idea is you have one overarching LLC and then a number of series underneath it where you can have separate ownership, you can have separate rules. If one series goes bankrupt, we don't know what happens to all the other ones. There's no case law on that. It's not expensive to have separate LLCs. I think the safer course, until we have court cases and a history of how the courts treat these series LLCs, you're just safer setting up separate LLCs. Can I mention one more thing before we go?
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. So the Corporate Transparency Act, no one's talking about it. And in part, we've talked to attorneys who don't know about it, and they're telling their clients that they don't have to follow it. And if your attorney says that you don't have to follow the Corporate Transparency Act, I would get a second opinion, because that's just a knee-jerk reaction to someone who really hasn't read the law. This law applies to almost everyone. There are a few exceptions, but most people think that these regulations are aimed at the big businesses. This regulation is aimed at the small business. This regulation is aimed at most business entities around the country. And so if someone tells you you don't have to follow it, you really need to get a second opinion.
And can people reach out to you? Can small businesses reach out to your business? I know you guys work with big businesses, but can small businesses reach out to you guys and get some advice on this stuff?
Yeah. You can call and get a free 15-minute consultation with an incorporating specialist, and we'll tell you how we can help you on this.
Yeah.
So, if someone's telling you don't need to follow the CTA, feel free to give us a call and we'll tell you what's real.
And we're going to have a lot of information out there. We're going to set up a page on our website that's dedicated to the Corporate Transparency Act. And then Corporate Direct also has a YouTube page where I post videos every week. So if you head on over to Corporate Direct, subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate that. But what's going to happen? Yep. Go ahead and subscribe. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do about 10 videos in the future that talk about the Corporate Transparency Act and what people need to do to comply with it. So we here at Corporate Direct are going to help people with these filings, and we're also going to provide a lot of information for the general public just to make sure that they're in good standing.
Yep. I love it. Thank you guys for sharing.
Ted Sutton, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. It's great that you're letting your listeners know about this important new law. It's not out there. And so kudos to you guys for getting it out there.
Thanks to you.
Thank you very much, guys. It's great chatting. Looking forward to talking again in the future.
All right.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
If you're a hairstylist, if you're a creative professional, and you are interested in your financial well-being, remember to like and subscribe so that more episodes just like this one show up in your YouTube feed.